On the night my driveway turned into a battlefield, the charger lay coiled like a promise I wasn't allowed to keep. The HOA's letter was a gavel, but between the lines, I heard something louder. A law I hadn't met yet, and a fight waking inside me that night again. By the time the letter arrived, the charger was already in the garage, still in its cardboard cradle, whispering a future of quiet mornings and clean air. I'd run my fingers over the smooth plug like it was a new passport. Freedom smelled like plastic and possibility. The envelope was the color of sour milk, the HOA logo stamped in blue as if to say, "We are official and permanently displeased." I slid it open with a butter knife. Sam leaned on the counter, eyebrow raised, as if waiting for the punchline that wasn't coming. "Dear Ms. Ortiz," it began, my name bent into formalities. "Your recent request to install an electric vehicle charging station is denied. Such devices are aesthetically inconsistent with our community values and may present safety concerns. Please refrain from any unapproved modifications. Non-compliance will result in fines." The signature looped like barbed wire. Sam read over my shoulder, breath warm against the side of my neck. "They can't stop us from charging a car," he said carefully, like a man testing floorboards that might give way. "It's our townhome. We own the wall." His voice faltered at the word own, as if daring anyone to disagree. The HOA president, Cheryl Winters, lived 3 doors down and smiled like a weather report. Sunny, then suddenly storm. I'd seen her measuring a neighbor's grass with a tape. Once. She said it was a prank. It didn't feel like jokes lived long in Cheryl's mouth. I held the letter in my lap like a cat that wouldn't be comfortable. My EV sat outside, silent and slightly smug, as if it knew its mere presence had started a war. The irony was sour in my mouth. I'd traded gas station arguments for hallway politics. In the evening, the neighborhood did its rituals. Sprinklers hissed, porch lights blinked awake. The little dog with the rhinestone collar patrolled his cul-de-sac kingdom. I kept glancing at the garage, at the unopened box like a birthday present you're not allowed to touch, not even to shake. At 9, a message pinged on the neighborhood app. From Cheryl. "Friendly reminder," it chirped. "No exterior modifications, without prior approval. That includes signage, satellite dishes, and EV charging units." The comments unfurled underneath, a ribbon of opinions. Most were emojis. One, from a neighbor named Pete, read, "Good eyesore." I typed out 3 different responses and deleted them all. Sam poured tea, slid the mug toward me. "Let's talk to them," he offered. "The diplomat. Explain we'll keep it discreet. Maybe in the garage. Conduit painted to match. No visible wires. Safety inspection. The whole checklist." I imagined sitting across from Cheryl at the long folding table in the clubhouse, her fingers steepled, the judgy ooze of community, standards sticking to everything. The thought knotted my stomach. I wasn't a confrontational person, I was a teacher. I fought with red pens and patience, not policy language. The next morning, I parked the EV in the furthest corner of the lot, where a maple threw shade like a cape. On my lunch break, I Googled, "HOA deny EV charger legal?" The results were a jumble of blog posts, anger-flared comments, and a few news clips with triumphant headlines. "State law," some of them said, like a talisman. Others warned, "It depends." I scrolled until my thumb ached. A student walked by, waved. I closed the tab, heart thudding as if I'd been caught reading something scandalous. After last period, I drove home holding my breath through every stoplight. Cheryl was in her driveway with pruning shears when I turned onto our street. She raised them like a salute. "Maya," she called. "I assume you got my correspondence?" The word correspondence floated between us like a soap bubble you couldn't pop without getting in trouble for ruining the air. I parked, smiled with my whole face the way teachers do on the first day. "I did," I said. "I was hoping to discuss—" "I'm afraid the board's decision is final," she cut in, already turning back to her hedge. "Until policies change. Enjoy your afternoon." The shears snipped, snipped, snipped. I tried to sleep that night, but the silence felt engineered. Too quiet, like a museum. At 2 a.m., I went downstairs and opened the garage. The cardboard gleamed in the motion sensor light. I opened the box. The charger smelled like a new book, and a promise I'd signed but not dated. I held the cable in both hands and pictured it strung across the wall, tucked neat, painted to match, a small lifeline humming quietly as polite as a nightlight. It didn't belong to debate. It belonged to the future, and yet here I was, arguing with ghosts from a committee handbook. The next day I swallowed my nerves and attended the HOA's open comments session. The clubhouse smelled like coffee that had decided it no longer needed to be helpful. Cheryl presided at the center with two board members I recognized mostly by their resting frowns. A portable mic stared up at me. I spoke about safety, about the electrician with 17 years experience and a firefighter brother, about tidy conduits and breakers and inspections. I spoke about emissions and asthma and my students who drew blue skies and coughed during recess. I asked for a pilot program. I asked for common sense. Cheryl thanked me for my thoughtful remarks. Then she read, in a tone that ensured nothing living could grow, a paragraph about uniformity and liability. Someone in the back cleared his throat like a chorus. When I sat, my legs trembled, traitors to my composed voice. Sam squeezed my hand. Useless comfort. After the meeting, a woman with a silver pixie cut approached. "I'm Nora," she said. "Unit 12C. I voted no on the ban last year." Her eyes were kind and tired. "You should know the board is afraid of being sued if something goes wrong. That fear eats all the oxygen." At 2:13 a.m., I found the sentence that tasted like Flint. Our state forbids HOAs from banning home EV chargers. The law didn't hum. It clicked, like a breaker. By sunrise, I had a template letter, a plan, and a courage I could finally plug into. It looked ordinary, unstoppable. After Nora's warning about fear and oxygen, I went home and pushed aside the charger box to get to the printer paper. Sam watched me unspool an extension cord for the laptop like I was laying rope for a climb. "Okay," he said. "What mountain are we summiting tonight?" The mountain had a bureaucratic name and a heartbeat. I typed until the words blurred, then found them again on a state website that wasn't pretty but looked official enough to settle an argument. "Right to charge," it said, like a banner hung over a new door. I clicked. There it was, plain as a chalkboard. Homeowners associations may not prohibit or unreasonably restrict an owner from installing an electric vehicle charging station in their unit or exclusive use area. They could ask for permits, licensed electricians, neat conduits, insurance. They could not stick a no on my future. I read it 3 times the way you read a thing that lets air back into your lungs. Sam perched on the arm of the couch, peering. "Is that?" "Yes," I said, and surprised myself by laughing. Not nice laughter, the kind with edges. They can't ban it. They can't. We made coffee no one needed and wrote a letter. Sam drafted. I hunted phrases: unreasonably restrict exclusive use area, licensed electrician, indemnify, insurance writer. The words were heavy tools laid gently in a row. I printed the statute and highlighted it the way I used to grade essays: fair, firm. In the morning, I called the number at the bottom of the page, a state energy office staffed by people who sounded tired and patient. A man named Caleb confirmed the law and emailed a template. "It helps," he said, "to mention the response timeline. 60 days. Silence equals approval." "What if they just fine us?" I asked. "Document everything," he replied. "Send it certified. If they threaten, forward it to us and the Attorney General's Consumer Unit. The statute has teeth." I thanked him and sat very still, like movement might jostle the good news and spill it. We mailed the letter certified, green card like a postage stamp of courage. Nora slipped me the board's direct emails, her eyes mischievous for the first time. "You're not the only one who wants a charger," she whispered. "If you get through, you open the gate." The word stuck. Gate. The gate swung the other way first. By afternoon, Cheryl posted a new policy reminder in the app and on every mailbox, her font crisp with authority. Unapproved electrical devices remain prohibited. Violators will incur immediate fines. Pete commented a thumbs up and a trophy, as if governance were a game. I stared at my phone, thumbs over the keyboard, then did as Caleb said. I forwarded everything. I also wrote Cheryl, calm, clipped, restating the statute, attaching proof of mailing. I mentioned the 60-day clock. I mentioned our electrician and the permit application. My pulse ticked like a metronome set fast. Cheryl replied in minutes, surgical as always. Your interpretation is incorrect. Our policy applies to exterior-facing elements. Townhomes differ from condominiums in the Act's definitions. We are consulting counsel. I read it aloud. Sam frowned. Is that true? I went back to the statute with a highlighter like a flashlight. It wasn't. The Act spoke in plain chorus. Common interest developments, planned developments, condominiums, stock co-ops. Ours was a planned development. My garage wall was my exclusive use area. It said the association could require approval but not deny outright. Reasonable restrictions, yes. A ban, no. I underlined it until ink pooled. Caleb sent an email. A sample indemnity agreement. An insurance rider. He sounded like a guided tour through a minefield. Give them everything reasonable, he wrote. Leave no place for fear to hide. We looped in our electrician, Luis, who responded with specs and a quote that read like math. The permit desk at City Hall knew Luis by voice. Another HOA? The clerk asked, sympathetic as a nurse. I filled out forms beside a bulletin board, tacked with lost pets and yoga. When the permit number printed, I felt the paper heat through to my palm like a badge. We taped the permit inside the garage like a talisman. That night, a storm gathered but never broke. The air was electricity without thunder. Cheryl's porch light burned late. At midnight, I saw her silhouette at her window, backlit and still, watching the street like a lifeguard who wouldn't dive. The HOA's attorney emailed the next morning on letterhead, thick with italics. He suggested a temporary moratorium while they evaluated fire risk. He asked for a copy of our electrician's license, insurance, plans, the inspector's phone number, my birth certificate, almost. I sent everything within the hour, pulse steady, jaw unclenched. Then I filed a complaint with the Attorney General. The online form asked for attachments. I fed it screenshots like a bird. When I clicked submit, the confirmation number looked like coordinates. Caleb replied within the hour. We've opened a case and contacted the association. A switch flipped someplace invisible. Nora slid a note under our door. Heard rumors. Emergency board meeting tomorrow. A line of neighbors texted privately. Quiet support, quiet fear. One message from a woman I didn't know. My son has asthma, thank you. I stood in the kitchen with my phone and realized my hands were shaking. Luis scheduled install for Friday at 8 a.m., pending HOA approval. We'll be in and out, he promised. Neat conduit, no drama. I pictured drama, orange extension cords, sirens, Cheryl with a megaphone. Sam squeezed my shoulder. We're doing this right, he whispered. If they say no, the state won't. The morning arrived ironed and gray. I wore my conference blazer. Sam's hand found mine. The clubhouse glowed like a hive. A thin crowd gathered, polite faces, noisy eyes, raincoats shedding droplets. Cheryl set papers in a neat stack. The microphone coughed awake. She looked up, smiling. Something was about to turn. Whether toward me, uncertain. They called it an emergency meeting, but what it really was, a fuse burning slow in a crowded room. I felt the heat crawl up my spine. The law was on our side, but power has habits. When the lights flickered, everyone looked up. I looked forward. Past the fear, the clubhouse smelled like damp umbrellas and coffee gone philosophical. Chairs scraped, raincoats sighed. Cheryl tapped the microphone. It fed back with a wounded squeal. Order, she said, and her smile was already an apology someone else would owe. To her right, the HOA attorney stacked papers like bricks in a wall. I sat near the aisle because I wanted a quick exit because I was done with exits. Sam squeezed my knee under the folding table, our quiet Morse code. Across the room, Nora gave me a small nod that could have been mistaken for a blink. Luis took the seat behind me, a neat folder on his lap, his calm radiating like a steady heartbeat. "Our agenda is limited," Cheryl announced. "The board will consider a temporary moratorium on resident-installed electrical devices pending further review from council and the fire authority." A hand shot up. "Nora. Open comments are allowed in emergency sessions per our bylaws," she said, voice gentle but anchored. I watched Cheryl's smile tighten like a knot being pulled. 2 minutes, she said. Per person. I stood first because the only way out was through. My mouth tasted like pennies. "I've submitted a complete application," I began, every word placed carefully in front of me like stepping stones. "Permit, plans, licensed electrician, insurance. The state's right to charge law prohibits an outright ban. I am asking you to do your job, impose reasonable requirements, and let us move forward." The attorney cleared his throat in a way designed to sound like authority. "The board's duty is to mitigate risk to the common welfare. There are unresolved safety concerns regarding garage EV charging and potential fire load." Luis stood with a nod from me. "I'm Luis Diaz," he said. "Master electrician, 17 years, 6 of those specializing in EVC installs. Your fire load in a compliant installation is lower than your average clothes dryer. UL-listed equipment, dedicated breaker with load calculation GFCI where required, disconnect within line of sight. Permit pulled. Inspector on deck. You're safer with it than without, because the alternative is people dangling extension cords." He didn't look at Pete, but we all did. Pete's eyes flinched, then hardened. "Property values," he declared like the words were a crucifix. "I don't want a spaghetti of wires on our buildings." "No one does," I said. "That's why the conduit will be painted to match. You can require that. But you can't require me to keep breathing yesterday." A woman I didn't know with careful hair and a nervous sweater stood, hands knit. "My son has asthma," she said, voice paper thin. "I don't know if this helps him. I just know it makes me feel like I tried." The room wavered and steadied. The attorney shifted, annoyed by emotion because it didn't fit on his memo. Cheryl held up her palm, a crossing guard in pearls. "We appreciate all perspectives," she said. And for a second I almost believed her. "But until we hear from the fire marshal..." The clubhouse door opened and the property manager hustled in, his phone held like a lantern. He looked at Cheryl like a weather warning. He whispered into her ear. Her composure flickered. "Our office," she said finally, voice careful now, "has received a letter from the State Energy Office and the Attorney General's Consumer Protection Unit." I heard the letter arrive inside me before she read it. Paper can make a sound like a match. She skimmed, then swallowed and read aloud. "Associations may not prohibit or unreasonably restrict the installation of an EV charging station in an owner's unit or exclusive use area. Delay tactics, including moratoria, are disfavored and may constitute an unreasonable restriction. Owners may be required to comply with building codes, obtain permits, use licensed contractors, indemnify the association, and maintain liability insurance. Failure to respond within 60 days constitutes approval. We are monitoring." Monitoring. A word with eyes. The attorney reached for the page, but Cheryl held onto it like a buoy. The room shifted on its axis. Pete leaned back, his chair issuing a small protest. Nora's smile happened in the smallest muscles at the corner of her mouth. "We will take a 10-minute recess," Cheryl announced, and vanished with her counsel through the side door. The room exhaled. Conversations rose like steam. Luis leaned forward. "She'll want a safe face," he murmured. "Let her, you got the win already." "Do we?" I asked, suddenly afraid to believe the thing that would rearrange my air. Sam's hand squeezed again. ... Yes. We filled the hallway with our small tribe. Nora, the woman with the asthma son, her name was Kay, I learned, and 2 others who whispered they'd been waiting for someone to go first. "Open the gate," Nora murmured, and I saw then that gates weren't just metal. They were policy, fear, habit. When the board returned, Cheryl's smile had been ironed smooth. The attorney spoke, words measured, a surgeon stitching a wound he hadn't expected to see. "The board recognizes the state statute and intends to comply. Effective immediately, the moratorium is lifted. The following reasonable conditions will apply. Permits must be obtained. Installation by a licensed electrician. Conduit painted to match. Owner pays all costs and electricity. Proof of $1 million liability coverage naming the association as additional insured. Owner indemnifies the association, and inspection sign-off provided to management. He looked up, waiting for a fight to break like weather. No one stormed. We nodded. It was a list we could carry. Pete raised his hand slowly. "What about the look?" he asked, softer than I'd ever heard him. "I don't want it to stick out." "It won't," Louise said, holding up a sample conduit and a paint swatch like a magic trick. Laughter rippled, a human thing in a room that needed it. Even Cheryl's mouth softened. I stood, my voice steady because the ground under it was finally solid. "We accept the conditions," I said. "We'll submit proof of insurance today and we're ready for install on Friday at 8 a.m. The gavel Cheryl had never needed finally made its appearance, a small wooden knock that sounded for once like permission. "Meeting adjourned," she said. The rain had stopped. We walked out into a world that smelled rinsed. Kay touched my elbow. "Thank you," she said. "He's 8, she added, her eyes flicking toward a townhouse where a small bike leaned like a punctuation mark against the railing. "He likes drawing clouds." "Bring him by," I said. "When we turn it on." Friday bloomed with the quiet purpose of a hospital morning. Luis arrived 5 minutes early with a coffee the color of courage. His assistant unloaded ladders with the choreography of people who've worked together long enough to speak without vowels. Sam tied back the hanging succulent that had been silently judging my stress all week. Cheryl materialized on the sidewalk, as if she grew there. She wore a raincoat even though the sky was an honest blue. "We'll be observing," she said, pluralizing herself with the authority of a sign. "Of course," Luis replied politely. He taped down drop cloths as if they were welcome mats. He marked the wall with painter's tape, a geometry of calm. He drilled. The sound was decisive but not aggressive. I watched the conduit climb the wall like a vine that knew where it belonged. We paused when the inspector arrived, his clipboard making everyone sit up straighter. He walked the line with Luis as two professionals finding the same language. GFCI, breaker size, distance from combustible storage. He checked connections with the tender suspicion of a man who'd seen every shortcut. Finally, he nodded. "Clean. Work," he said, and initialed a square that had looked like a box I might never get to fill. The last piece was the breaker in the panel, a simple switch with all the myth laid over it. We crowded into the garage like a family around a cake that hadn't yet been cut. Kay stood at the curb with her son, who craned forward on tiptoe, eyes shining with parade energy. "Would you like to do it?" Luis asked, bowing slightly toward me. My fingers hovered, then set. I thought of the nights I'd lain awake with, the box unopened, of Cheryl's clipping shears, of Nora's sly slip of emails, of Caleb's patient voice, of Sam's Morse code, of a state law written by people I'd never meet deciding to stand next to me in my garage. I flipped the switch. The charger woke. A small ascending chime, a green ring blooming like a breath around its face. The car responded, a soft click, then a pulsing light by the charge port, heartbeat speed. The cable fit into its mouth with a snug yes. On the dash, numbers flickered, then held. Charging. A cheer rose, ragged but real. It wasn't a stadium, it was 6 people and a world reorganizing around a detail. Kay's son's fingers drummed near the car, absorbing its song. Pete, at the edge of the group, pretended to be uninterested and didn't succeed. Cheryl stood with her hands in her raincoat pockets. She looked smaller in that moment, or maybe just human-sized. "I wish," she said so quietly, I almost didn't hear. "Someone had told us we wouldn't be sued for doing the right thing." "Someone did," Nora said gently. "They wrote it down. Sometimes we just need a translator." Cheryl nodded, a tiny surrender. "We'll formalize the policy at the next meeting," she said to me. "If others want, we'll need a process." "I'll help draft it," I offered before I could overthink it. the teacher in me unable to resist a rubric. Cheryl's eyes flicked to mine and held there, recalibrating. Then she nodded again. That evening, the charger hummed like a lullaby. The car drank without guilt. The porch lights blinked on one by one, less like a curfew and more like candles. I texted Caleb a photo, the green ring like a planet, my hand in the frame like proof. He replied with a thumbs up and a line. Policy is a power tool. On Monday, I showed my students the picture. We talked about laws that live far away and laws that live on your wall. We drew diagrams of circuits and community. When the bell rang, a kid with shy shoulders hung back. Miss, he said. My grandma's HOA told her no to a ramp. His eyes found an exit sign, then found me again. Is there a law for that? Sometimes, I said, and added a new rope to my list, a new mountain with a heartbeat. Weeks later, conduit lines began to appear in our neighborhood like veins the sun could finally see. Kay waved when hers went in. Pete posted a guide on the app titled How to Make It Not Ugly, his thumbs up softening into a joke everyone was in on. Nora and I chaired a sustainable living committee that met under string lights and startled even us by how many people came. The charger never bragged. It just did its job. A small, stubborn future stitched to the wall of a garage in a townhome that smelled like coffee and chalk dust and the occasional victory. The HOA never loved it, not exactly, but they learned to live in the same sentence with it. So did I. The night before our first road trip, I stood in the garage and listened. The hum was the same hum as always, but I heard a crowd in it, lawmakers and clerks and electricians and neighbors and a teacher holding a pen like a match. The difference between a fight and a cause is sometimes a document. Sometimes it's a switch. The charger lay coiled like it had on the first night, but now the promise was kept. The HOA had tried to block it. The state had stepped in. The switch had flipped, and not just in the breaker panel, in the meeting room. In Cheryl's posture, in me.